Hi there, everybody. Thank you for joining another episode, the first episode of the New Nation podcast. This is not a new podcast, but a new podcast. Thank you all for joining. We really do appreciate it. Before we start with today's episode, this is the 94th episode, we're going to have a word from our new partner, Heaven's Harvest. Now, what's great about Heaven's Harvest is a preparedness. What happened? Can anybody hear me? The lights went out. I don't know what happened. Oh, boy. Oh, there they go. The lights are back on. Wow. Thank goodness the lights came back on, because if you ever found yourself in a power outage that lasted for longer than 2-3 days, what are you going to do about your food? What are you going to do about the food that's in your refrigerator that is now rotting? Okay. What are you going to do? How are you going to eat? How are you going to feed yourself? How are you going to feed your family? I'll tell you what you can do. You can get a bucket, Heaven's Harvest. This thing has over, I think, 60 servings. Look at this. Food and drink serving, over 60 of them. Highly densely caloric food in pouches that are able to sustain 25 years of shelf life. Get them from heavensharvest.com. Use our code GREAT for 10% off. Not only do they have these ready-made meals, they have snacks, okay? They have water filtration system products. They've got seeds. Their seed kits are absolutely fantastic. Go out and get yourself. Be prepared. Be a prepper, okay? Prepare for the worst. Be prepared out there, and you don't want other people coming to grab your buckets, okay? They don't need to know about your buckets. Get your own buckets at heavenharvest.com. Use our code GREAT for 10% off at checkout, and that's nice. Thank you, Heaven's Harvest. We're going to just move you over there. I usually like it better when they give me scripts to read off of, but I think that was all right. I think the lights really didn't go out, and you can hear our guest in the background laughing, and I'd like to introduce her. Now seems like an appropriate time. The first guest of the New Nation podcast. Please help me welcome from Instagram. Her first name is Marie, but her Instagram name is CatholicCaritas. It's Latin. Hi, welcome, Marie. Hi there.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Oh, you're very, very welcome. Where are you in the world?
I am in Texas, the best state in the USA.
Okay. Yeah, I can deal with that. So thank you for coming on. We really do appreciate it. And it's nice to have, I think, this sort of outlook on the world. You are a Catholic mom, correct?
Yeah, that's a very small definition of me, but yes, I am.
Okay, yeah. Well, you're the first Catholic mom that we've had on the show. So that's
Are you
nice.
really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Wow, I'm super honored.
Yeah. Our other female guests, I think all but one of them was married or is married. So you might be the second married guest that I've had on the show or ever had the pleasure of speaking to. Female. So married female. We've had plenty of married men on the show. But thank you for joining. We're going to talk about Catholicism, right?
Yeah, and a lot of other stuff.
Yeah.
But on the basis of Catholicism, though. So with the basis of that.
Yes. So let's talk a little bit about you, if you don't mind introducing yourself and give the audience a little bit of history about you, and maybe we can start off with how you came to the faith. If you're a cradle Catholic, a revert, a convert, let us know a little bit about you, Marie.
Yeah. So I was born in 1988. I'm just kidding. I'm not going to do that. I'm a cradle Catholic. I have never left the faith, if you will. And that's pretty much been a large part of my identity my whole life. That doesn't mean that I didn't go through periods of adolescence and rebellion like everyone else. But definitely have stayed true to my faith most of my life. And I just felt a huge call after having most of my kids, hopefully, God willing, we'll have more, to just kind of share more about my faith. The more I talked to people and spoke to people, I got an inkling that there was just not a lot of strong female voices like mine on Instagram and on social media. And I thought that I had a pretty unique perspective. In addition to, I am also in an interfaith marriage. So I'm a devout Catholic, raised devout Catholic, and I am in an interfaith marriage with a non-denominational, non-practicing Protestant.
Whoa.
Yeah.
What's that like?
It's a lot of things. It's simultaneously really difficult and a cross that I have to bear. In addition to, I learn a lot, and I have learned a lot, and it's quite a blessing. I've actually delved deeper into my faith because of my interfaith marriage. It's kind of given me that swift kick in the butt to kind of really take charge of my faith and really ingrain it into my life, especially after having kids.
Does your husband go to church with you guys?
Yes.
How
So
long?
before,
Yeah, go ahead.
yeah. Well, when I met my husband, so the story is, I dated Catholic guys before my husband, and yeah, it just never really worked out. It was a multitude of guys that were Catholic in name only, and they, just didn't present me with the virtues and the integrity that I was looking for. And when I did find one that had all those things, we ended up breaking up. And just cut 2 years later, he is now a priest. So there
Whoa.
was a reason for that.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I really like using that example primarily because I like explaining how everyone has a different path
Hmm.
in their call to holiness.
Yeah.
So, although a Catholic marriage with that particular man probably would have been great. God was calling him to something else, a different
Hmm.
vocation, not better or worse, just something different, right? So his path to holiness is very different than mine. My vocation was marriage. So then I met my husband, and I realized that I was falling in love with someone who was not Catholic and didn't really know what that meant because I had never really, I was very strict on dating pretty much only Catholics once it got out of the high school stage of like, just figuring out what kind of guys you, uh, you know, veer towards.
Hmm.
And so I kind of went on this journey with my husband of explaining to him for the first couple of years what it meant to be married to a Catholic woman. And I didn't really have a lot of guidance in that area. I kind of just did a lot of praying, talked to a lot of priests, and didn't get much support in terms of talking to the priests. They were pretty much just giving me a little bit of guidance as to what I needed to make sure of. Some of them were like, don't do it.
Whoa.
There was a couple that were just like,
Hmm.
I don't think that's a good idea. Now, these were priests who didn't know me. So my actually hometown priest was the most helpful
Yeah.
because he knew me and he knew of my devotion and dedication and my assertive nature, which helps a lot. So in those years of discussing that with my husband, pretty much what ended up happening was I went through all the things that were non-negotiable. And then I
Hmm.
went through all the things that I wanted him to have informed consent for so
Yeah.
that he knew that if he was going to marry a Catholic woman and he was going to raise Catholic children, what that meant. Because I had a lot of friends who married Protestants that it was sort of like, sure, we're in love. This is great, amazing. And then they get married and their husbands or their, wife or whatever was like, wait, I'm going to teach my kids that the Eucharist is what? I'm
Yeah.
going to teach my kids about Mary being what? And so I didn't want that to happen. I wanted him to be fully consenting to marrying me so that there would be no issues later on. So, one of the things that he had to agree to in order for us to move forward in dating was that you will attend Mass with us every Sunday and holy days of obligation.
Really?
We had a lot of discussions about that, about as to why, he wasn't just like, okay, he was like, well, but like, why? And I was like, well, first of all, there's tons of studies that show if you don't make Mass or church, if you will, even a priority, that your children won't make it a priority.
Right.
And they will end up just thinking it is just something that we did when we were younger and not something that they will continue to utilize and kind of envelop in their lives as they get older.
Wow.
So that was a number one, like non-negotiable for me.
Okay. And so, obviously you don't have to answer questions you're uncomfortable with, but so how long have you been with your husband?
We have been together for 15 years, married for 10 on December 31st.
Okay. So this is not a judgment call of your husband. Throughout all those years, has he expressed any sort of desire to convert or to enter the faith?
No. Yeah. And I that's a great question that I love when people ask me because I never asked him. And I still have never asked him because I never wanted him to convert. And there's no shame or anything wrong with asking. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
I had some friends who asked and their husbands or their wives were like, okay. I didn't want that for my husband. I wanted him to come to the faith because of truth. I
Yeah.
wanted him to come to the faith because he was seeking truth and he had a direct encounter with Christ in his heart and the Holy Spirit
Right.
moved him.
Oh,
And so, yeah, I've never asked him to. So, there's interest is kind of a different topic, interest in,
right.
what does he find interesting? He's very intellectual. So we have a lot of conversations about it.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, there's one. I feel like I'm gonna visit my parents. We're gonna take our daughter up to New York for her third birthday, and I think I want to do an episode with my dad. And my dad was raised Jewish, but you know, as we were brought up, my brothers and I, my mom brought us to church. We were altar boys, and my dad would come to church. And I recently asked him, maybe about a month and a half ago. I was doing a drive somewhere, and I don't know what compelled me to call him, but I called him, and I asked, I said, why haven't you converted? Like, how come you never became Catholic? And he gave me the answer that was kind of like, oh, well, organized religions. I don't necessarily, I don't know if I believe in them. I believe in God, but I don't know. And, as why I went to church is because, I was there for you guys. I was there, we were there as a family. And it just kind of gave me pause because I'm a little fearful because my dad's older. He looks young, but he's older. He's going to be almost 80 soon. And I don't want him to get to a point where, let's say, he's at the point and he's not even baptized. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Would there be any sort of advice that you have being a cradle Catholic, being a Catholic throughout your whole marriage and pretty much throughout your whole life? Because I'm a recent revert.
Mhm.
Is there any advice, or is it just kind of like allow him to either come to it or not? Because I don't
Well,
want to
the
put you
thing,
don't want to push someone.
right, right, and you can't like it's. I get this all the time because I have wonderful followers that message me and ask me that are in interfaith marriages, whether by reversion, conversion, what have you. And they're like, how can I convert my spouse? How can I convert my mom? How can I
Mhm.
convert my family? And my first answer is always, you can't.
Right.
It's not you. You will never be able to convert someone. I have a lot of conversion in my life. My mother is a convert from Baptist. My almost all my aunts are converts. My uncle, who's also my godfather, converted at the age of 55. Was I guess you'd say he got sort of slowly the Holy Spirit worked through his daughter, who was a focus missionary, his
Oh,
only
wow.
daughter.
Okay.
Yeah, they couldn't really, they struggled with infertility, and they were only able to have my beautiful, wonderful cousin. And it's just like a beautiful story of just surrender in that
Mhm.
at the age of 55, he converts to Catholicism. And he was pretty much one of those like, wanted to make sure everyone knew in my big Italian Catholic family, like he was Protestant and,
Yeah.
you know, so these things happen slowly, but I get what you're saying when it comes to older parents. And especially when it comes to like again, your parents, and I've talked to my cousin about this quite a bit, that a lot of times it's just sharing your encounters with Christ through the Catholic faith,
Yeah.
how you have encountered Christ. And obviously with a Jewish uh, father, that's a little bit more difficult because a lot of times it's typically you know, just lazy Christian parents that or lazy Christian husbands or what have you. Um, but I mean, Judaism, man,
Well, to
there's so
even
much.
to even call him Jewish would be a
And
stretch because not bar
was his
mitzvah,
name
not any
Jack?
of that. Both his parents were. So
Okay.
obviously, like there is the title or the affiliation, but he's
Mhm.
never been a practicing Jew.
Yeah.
So
But there's
he's
nostalgia, right? There's a connection to like,
yes,
even if
yes,
he's
and
not
I mean,
practicing.
listen, we've gone to Passover Seders with my grandparents on that side, but
Yeah.
I mean, that was, once a year. This man was going
Mhm.
to church with us every Sunday.
Yeah.
So it's
But
just
there's something to be said for, my husband has learned a lot from attending mass and
mhm,
even more from me sitting in mass. And I'm not the silent mom that's sitting there
right.
like praying during mass. I'm literally whispering to my children what's happening in mass and how it mimics the Old Testament, how it mimics
Oh,
parts of Judaism. And so
yeah.
my husband hears some of these things. And, especially when we come home and my oldest asks a question, about, okay, well, the Paschal sacrifice, what about this? And so I'm able to literally talk to my husband
Mhm.
through my children because I'm like, oh, maybe talk a little louder than I need to
Right.
be. But ultimately, it kind of comes down to sparking interest through what there's a nostalgia to Judaism with your father,
Yeah.
obviously, even if he wasn't practicing.
Right.
And I kind of continue to focus on the similarities and again, like the new covenant.
Interesting.
Because although he may not be like know all of the reasons behind the Jewish traditions, like he could very easily be like a lax Jew, like someone would be a lax Catholic and not have
Right.
any idea why we, do this during
Right.
mass or whatever. But it's still something that they can relate to,
Yes.
even if it's not. So I would definitely say my advice would be just continue towards the path of connecting the Jewish roots of Catholicism because they're there, you
Yeah.
know?
Well, maybe he slowly makes the convert to like Messianic Jew, and then he does
Yeah.
the ultimate to Catholic. It's very interesting because out of all the faiths, I feel like my dad's one of the smartest people I've ever met, and I feel like through logic and reason, he probably would be able to make more sense of the Catholic faith because I think there's just so much of it within the history of Catholicism. You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Yeah. It's funny because I've found though through a lot of people that would say, I'm a very logical, reasonable person. And a lot of those people were converted through I don't want to say emotion, but that's the only word I can think of right now.
Mhm.
It's that, you could have laid it all out for them and they could have been like, yeah, okay, okay. But sometimes there has to be an emotional connection to
The
understand,
suspension from logic and reason. I mean, that's
yeah.
really the only way one can really truly believe in a God is through the suspension of logic and reason. Yeah.
Yes, yes, yeah, faith and reason. Pope John Paul II, I believe, is wrote an encyclical on that, Ratio et Fatio or something. But
Okay.
yeah, that's totally true. I mean, they both have to coexist.
Yeah.
So, with just reason and without the faith, you kind of are left feeling like, how can I make that final leap? And all of the faith, another reason, leaves you vulnerable to attacks, I guess you could
Mhm.
say.
Mhm.
So you kind of do need both.
What so 2 questions. What is the youngest of your kids, or when was the youngest, or at what age did you start really explaining to them what was going on at mass? Because I have a 2.5-year-old and she has a very hard time sitting still. So we're in the narthex and she's usually running back to to the bookshelf and picking books off, and my wife will get up and go and attend to her while I'm there, and I kind of feel like, I'm being a little bit selfish because I want to be present during the mass. And I people would say, well, it's the role of your wife to attend to the child, and do I don't know, watch her the whole time. Like sometimes, if my wife's not feeling too good, I'll take my daughter to mass, and I'll be the one that's going back and forth between the pew and the bookshelf and all that kind of stuff. But I'm listening to what's going on at the mass too. So,
Yeah.
how at what age did you start really talking about what's going on during the mass? And also during the gospel reading, why do we do the cross here, here, and here? I have an
Yeah.
idea, but I forget why.
Yeah. So it's actually really beautiful. And one of the things that I love about the Catholic Mass is that there's a lot of things that people that are not, and maybe even some Catholics, would see people doing and think it's just empty gestures.
Hmm.
But in reality, they are completely embedded in scripture and they are embedded in, like using our human nature or senses, which God made us, and that's why it's kind of cool. He knows that we have senses and we need to use them. So,
Hmm.
like I've talked before about the smelling of the incense, right? The beautiful architecture, looking and seeing the beauty, and tasting the Eucharist, and again, all of the gestures that we do. So when we do that, we are telling God to be in our thoughts, in our
Hmm.
words, and in our hearts.
Right.
And so, yeah, I would say to answer your question about when I started doing that with my kids, two is still when you're in the stage of they're still learning who and what God is.
Yeah.
So to kind of go into the mass is very overwhelming for them.
Hmm.
They will not to mention with child brain development, they wouldn't even be able to retain that, barring any kind of like genius child.
To interject before you answer this, my 2.5-year-old knows the Hail Mary.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah.
I'm
I mean,
just
that's
saying
definitely where
she's
you
a
start.
genius. That's
Yeah. Yes. Yes. But your daughter is the genius that I will speak to then.
yeah, sure.
No, so I mean, memorization of prayers, that's a great point. That's really where you would start is
Hmm.
just yeah, like saying the prayers, because they don't even know the meaning of the prayers until later. There's this
Right.
slow development of layers to Catholicism as you're teaching your children these things. That, yeah, it's first, who is Jesus? Who is God? And that's kind of where you speak to talk about the Trinity, and then really it goes to who is Mary.
Hmm.
And that's a really beautiful teaching that I love, because as a mother of 4 boys, I actually just experienced this last night. Um, so I pretty much read to them every night. My husband works a lot. He is
Hmm.
actually traveling right now. And he does read to them, but not quite as much as me. And so
Yeah.
when I'm reading to them, and I have a lot, I mean, just a plethora of books. I'm a big book person.
Yeah.
The media that they're exposed to a lot is primarily books. And they just really soak it up as little, kid sponges. So when I'm reading to them about Mary and about the Catholic Church's view on Mary, I am so overwhelmed as a woman being able to explain our omnipotent creator
Hmm.
and all of the intricacies and the mysteries of him, and then be able to explain to them that he chose a human woman to, enter into, to come into the flesh, and his just deep love and devotion to his mother, and that's just a really cool thing to be able to teach 4 boys as a strong female mother,
Hmm.
to be able to show them that there is great examples in the Catholic faith and the Bible of how to treat women and how to treat your mother first.
Hmm.
And that's where you start, is you
Yeah.
start with Mary. You start with how Jesus treated his mother, and Mary's role too, how important mothers and women are, especially as we experience this in the complete erasing of women in our culture right now,
Yeah.
that I don't even have to explain to them why that's bad, because I can start with the basis of Mary and work from there, because they will never accept that ideology if I'm teaching them about the Catholic viewpoint on Mary,
Right.
because they will go, yeah, that doesn't make sense. Like, that
Yeah.
doesn't make sense at all. Women are, there's a reason God made them, and there's a reason he chose this woman, and there's a reason he chose to come down in that way as a little baby,
Yeah.
being born.
Right.
So yeah, it really does start with that basis of God, the Trinity, and then Mary, and like you just said, the prayers. Like, that's so amazing that she knows the Hail Mary already too.
Yeah.
And also, I love their little voices when they're praying.
Oh,
Like,
it's so
record them
cute.
so much.
Yeah.
Like, I know you don't think about it because you're praying, but seriously, record them. It's
Oh
just,
no, I
oh,
have. I have.
okay, yeah.
And
I'm like,
it's funny too because we do it before, so we do it before she goes to bed, and then I'll read to her. But within maybe the first 1 or 2 weeks while we were praying, she would be laughing and smiling at us, and then I stopped during the middle of it once, and I was like, babe, no laughing. Okay, let's try and get through a prayer because we're saying a prayer to our mother. She says, okay. So we've done that a couple more times. And then now, before we even start praying, she'll look at me. She says, no laughing. And I said, that's right, bub, no laughing. And I think it's just the cutest thing. And I think I don't know. And it just makes so much sense now that you said that. I don't know. I didn't know before. I think I know now the reason why I'm so zealous over Mary. And I think it just makes sense, especially for men, is that Mary reminds me of my mother. Me and my mother are very, very close. She's
that's
a
good.
Latin woman, so she may look like even a little bit like Mary. Who knows? But
Uh,
it's when someone insults Mary, I feel as if they're insulting my birth mother,
yep.
let alone my spiritual mother, let
Yeah.
alone my universal mother. So
Yeah.
maybe that's why I feel so strongly attached to Mary. And I think a lot of men, especially Latin men, have that connection. Just because I think in that culture, the relationship between sons and mothers are so strong. And I think in general, sons and mothers usually have that strong bond.
Oh
So
yeah. I mean, we still have the cell. Your mother still has your cells in her body. I mean, still to this day, which is such a cool science fact that I love bringing up when people bring
that's right.
up
Yeah.
that Mary, was not just a vessel. And I'm like, okay, well, I have all of my children's, cells still going in my body. That's
Hmm.
something my husband will not be able to experience. That doesn't make me better than him. It's just a fact of
It's
science.
it's a different relationship.
Yeah.
What's
But
the
also, kind
Go
of
ahead.
pointing to what you were saying about you have a good relationship with your mother. The
Yeah.
other beautiful side of Mary is that she's a really great place to go to if you have a mother wound as well.
Really?
Yeah. And like, there's a lot of people I've talked to that especially, I have two of my best friends are converts as well, just
Mhm.
swimming in converts. And they had a struggle with identifying with Mary, of course, because your whole life you've been told, it's don't worship her, it's evil. Catholics do it, she's nothing, whatever. So when you come into the faith and you know the truth, but you still like, again, it's ingrained in you to kind of like push away from it. A lot of them have done consecrations, but ultimately what I found out was a lot of them had a struggle because they had a mother wound. And then when they finally did some, maybe they read a book on entrustment to Mary, maybe they did the bronze scapular, then there's a bunch of things you can do to help with that. It was sort of a place that they could rest, even if that mother wound is continued, right? Maybe
Yeah.
you don't have a great relationship with your mom, even to this day, like that's okay. Mary can actually help you heal from that and help you get the mother love that you want and deserve, and then
Yeah.
also can help you heal from your earthly mother wound. So it's really beautiful.
Why do you think there's such a strong, and I'm not saying all, I'm saying most. Why is there such a strong pushback from the Protestant community regarding Mary? Because they seem to take like literal offense to it, offense to what we do and to how we worshiping as a whole. But
Yeah, because I mean, even Martin Luther had an
right.
affinity. Yeah,
Yeah. So what is that? I mean, is it d-
it definitely started from the Reformation, obviously. But that kind of like, I guess if you looked at it from the perspective of each individual denomination devolving as we went on, they just started removing everything. You know what I mean? When people will get upset with me online, especially in my, like in the comments, Protestants, they're always like, oh, you're saying I'm wrong, but no one likes to be told they're wrong. And I always like to say, I'm not saying Protestantism is wrong,
Mhm,
because I think it's better to say Protestantism is lacking, right?
mhm.
Because they'd be like, well, why would it be wrong if I love Jesus? And it's like, that's so much more complicated thing to get into. It's
Yeah,
much easier to say it's lacking because you don't have as many gifts and sacraments and things that would behoove you, the things that would help you. So I think that there was a lot of propaganda, and as it continued more and more, because obviously the Catholic Church is a huge threat to the secular world, and
mhm.
Protestantism is kind of going towards the secular world while Catholicism goes away from it.
Yeah,
So if you're going to continue to go more secular as a Christian denomination, yeah, it's going to attack something that is good, like
mhm.
Mary. And actually, there's this book that I got, someone mentioned it to me, and I think a Protestant friend was reading it, where it was basically talking about, this is my actual pity for Protestant women, that they don't have Mary to look up to as a young female Catholic, as a young female Christian when I was younger. To be able to look to Mary in moments where I was angry at God was such a blessing, because there was times I probably would have just given up on God. I would have been like,
Mhm.
I don't get you. I don't understand you. You don't make sense. You're not doing a lot of things good for me, it feels like. And I hate you right now. And if I didn't have Mary to lean on and look to, then I probably would have just fallen away. But Mary, and that's the thing that a lot of Protestants misunderstand. Her goal, her only goal, is to continually bring you back to her son
Right.
over and over and over again.
And that they
So
do have that. They're not even missing that. They have it. They just don't take advantage
right,
of it,
right,
right?
yeah, yeah, yeah. They have it. They've rejected it. Yeah,
Right.
that's correct.
Oh,
And
that's so
so, and
sad.
that's sad, because they don't have, uh, convents. They don't have the holy orders, right?
Mhm.
So like women can't even go into, like, you feel a deep call and love towards God. You can't even go become a nun.
Right.
And there's the huge, and that's why you have that huge headbutting
Well,
of
they can be
women
pastors.
being ordained.
Yeah.
And
Oh, wow.
that's the thing there. It's a feel and a call to value,
Mhm.
and the misunderstanding is power, though.
Mm.
They see the pastor as having power, when in reality, because a lot of people would say that to me, even in Catholic faith. Oh, well, you can't be. I'm like, what? Name a famous Catholic. Well, now that's harder. Father Mike came into the picture, and I can't say this anymore. I'm like, name a famous Catholic priest. But at the time, back in the day, I used
Doc
to say
Bishop
you could.
Fulton.
Yeah, but at the time, not even like Protestants didn't know who that was, but
Right.
they knew who Mother Teresa was.
Right.
You
Right.
know, so you can make an impact as a woman in the Catholic faith in so many ways, where
Hmm.
they show your value as a mother, as a nun. There's so many ways for us to be involved in, and in the Protestant church, it's kind of non-existent. So you almost can see why they're so upset about the women ordination,
I get
because
that.
they don't have it. They can't look to Mary, and they don't have convents, they don't
The
have holy
saints.
orders.
The saints.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah.
And the saints, right, and they don't have the saints. Yeah,
Well,
so what a
think
pity.
about all the women who have gone through the horrible agony, the physical pain, and the mental stress of, let's say, miscarriage. We all know
Yeah.
people who have been through it, and the Catholic woman has someone like Saint Catherine of Siena. They have other saints who they can really use, and I don't know if I'm using that word right, but they can use to talk to and have them intercede on their behalf, bring their prayers to God, because these women were anointed by God to watch over them, to be their, I don't know, spiritual godmothers in a way. And I mean, that could just be, I might be completely messing up how I view the saints in any way, but I don't like. What do you do? You're a Protestant person. What do you do? Like, who do you, let's say you're going through something like that. Let's say you're a Protestant man who, is struggling looking for a job, and like me, as a Catholic, I would say prayers to Saint Joseph, who's the patron saint of fathers and the patron saint of people seeking employment. There are reasons why these saints have these sort of roles in our lives, and I understand the Protestant would say I go directly to God, and I mean, I would like to think that God listens to me, but He's also listening to a lot of other people. So He has put people in the world, in our universe, in heaven, on His behalf, who will take these matters directly to Him while He's kind of busy doing His thing with everybody else. Again, might be messing that up a lot, but that's kind of how I view them. Okay, if I'm going through this, I can call a direct line to this person who is available 24/7, which God is available 24/7. I get that. But also as a Catholic who sometimes struggles with praying to God, I have no problems praying to Mary. No problems. And I will say, yes, I pray to Mary. If you have a problem with that, sorry. Sorry.
Well, so first I'm going to start with, yeah, I mean, you're like the way that you view the saints. I would say that when you go to the direct line to God, He will just then refer you to that saint, right?
Yeah.
Because it's like God, like they existed, they were people. It's like going, oh yeah, by the way, open that book about that biography about that person who loved me and followed me to the ends of the earth, and
Hmm.
see what they did, and then
Right.
that can actually give you a lot of insight. I mean, it's really a beautiful teaching, the communion of saints, in that
Hmm.
way, where we have all these resources.
Yeah.
Um, and the other question I had was, and this may be too personal, so you don't have to answer it, but why do you have a struggle when praying directly to God
Here's the
sometimes?
thing. Here's the thing. And because I just wanted to ask you, and Seamus O'Laughlin brought this up with Matt Fradd, where he talked about a part of his faith is like any other relationship where you might not be necessarily 100% devoted to it at all times. You know what I mean? And for me, um, I haven't. I've seen the actions. I know God is present. I know God has put things in front of me. I know God has put people in front of me. But I'm jealous of a lot of people because I haven't heard Him yet. Does that make sense? I haven't heard His voice. I've seen what He does, but I know a lot of people have said that God has spoken to them, and I guess I'm waiting for that. And I'm not. When I pray, I'm not being demanding of it. I need to hear you. Why aren't you talking to me? But I'm patiently waiting. And that day it might never come. Like I might get that opportunity when I meet Him. But I
Can I
think
ask you
that's,
something?
yeah, go ahead.
Have you, because you're a revert, so sometimes this kind of comes a little later, but what is your, I would say, like, I'm drawing a blank on the word. I only got like 2 hours of sleep last night. Your connection with
Mhm.
adoration, like how often do you go? Have you gone? Is that something that you're still kind of like getting
Haven't
back
gone
into?
yet.
Oh,
Haven't
so you
gone
know
yet.
what?
Yes.
I'm going to encourage you to attend adoration, and that might be your, ticket to hearing God,
Okay. Okay.
because And I'll tell you a short little story, because then something else you said reminded me of biblical gender roles. And that was like, whew, I want to talk about that. Last year. So my husband and I, we got pregnant with our fourth, and that was like during 2020.
Mm-hmm.
And that was fun. And then we were building a house, and we were selling our house and moving. It was a SHIT show. And so I was struggling a lot. There was so much going on in the world. There was so much going on in our lives. As a mother, I was just struggling in life in general. My husband was too busy to really, kind of help me process, nor do I feel like it was necessarily his job to help me process, right?
Mm-hmm.
Our spouses can be a lot of things to us, but they cannot be everything.
Yeah.
And that's where Christ comes in. So I was struggling a lot. We moved, and I really needed a therapist, And I really wanted a Catholic one this time. And so I couldn't even find a regular therapist. It was like everyone was struggling. And so they were all full.
Right.
And there was this podcast called The Place We Find Ourselves, which is Adam Young. He is not Catholic. It's not a Catholic podcast, but he has a lot of Catholics on there a lot. He's a wonderful person. I just was praying a lot, and, God was just like, kind of gave me this feeling of like, just email him and see what happens. And it was such a dumb thing, because I was like, there's no way he's going to answer. He is so popular, and he lives in a completely different state.
Mm-hmm.
And so I emailed him, got an email back that was just like, we're really busy. And I was like, whatever. And then maybe 2 hours later, I get an email back from him that was just so thoughtful, so kind. And he directed me towards the most holy priest I've ever met in my life. And I was introduced to him over Zoom. That priest then helped me find a Catholic therapist here.
Wow.
Where I live. And so that all to say, that Catholic therapist then was like, okay, we're going to be going through a lot of stuff, and you're going to be doing a lot of work that's going to suck, healing work, whatever, all the things that you're going through in life right now. It's hard. Life sucks. It's just hard. That's the way it is. Suffering is a part of life. I'm going to encourage you to start attending adoration once a week. And I was like, okay, well, whatever. So I did. It started with once a week, and I just would go in there and sit. Like, I just would go in the back, and I would just sit, and she was like, do it for 30 minutes to an hour, like with focus on an hour. And I would start doing 30 minutes, and it was literally like, okay, it's 15. All right, I got 15 more minutes. Okay, I'll say a few Our Fathers and Hail Marys. And then slowly I really started to realize, okay, well, I'm like sitting in front of a sacrament right now. Like Jesus is in front of me. What do I do? And I see all these older women around me wearing veils, because like I went during the middle of the day, and like no one's there except old women, and they're all wearing veils. And this was a moment that I had where I actually incited me to start veiling. There was an old woman who literally looked like an old Jewish woman from like the Bible. She was just like in all black, had a very intense veil on, just like big dress or whatever. She was prostrating herself when I walked in on the floor in front of the Eucharist. For a minute,
Really?
I was a little worried. Yeah, I was like, oh, wait, whoa, what happened? And then I realized,
for those people who don't know what that is they actually lay down on the floor in front of the sacrament, correct? Like,
yes, prostrating is, and the priests do that when they get, if they do their final vows.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was just kind of like went into my little, seat and sat down and was just like in awe of her. I was like, wow, she's really going all in. And then as she had to get up, she struggled. She was like almost 80, and I helped her up, and then she sat in her chair. And the whole time I just got thinking, she was doing that because she knows what's in front of her, and she was acting as such.
Mm-hmm.
And then I thought, what am I doing? I'm just sitting here. And although I'm sitting here, I am not acting like what I believe, which is that Christ is present, body, blood, soul, and divinity in front of me in the Eucharist and in the monstrance, which is the host encapsulated in this beautiful holder, if you will. And so from that moment, I, went into it with that mindset. Now, I didn't start feeling it right away, but I went to it going, okay, the first things first, she was showing reverence and obviously prostrating herself in humbleness. Yeah. So I started going into it and not asking for things, but thanking him for things.
Right.
Like, Thank you for my husband, things that I was not thankful for. And thank you for my husband. Thank you for my kids right now. Thank you for this, hardship. Thank you for my house. Like things that I was like, yes, those things I have. And then slowly I started praying for things that I wanted, but not things. I was
Yeah.
like, give me joy.
Right.
I'm going through this hard season of life, which is young children in our, in the climate that we have. And it's just hard in general. And I need joy, but I don't have it. And I don't think you can, sometimes you definitely do choose it sometimes. But eventually I started hearing God, not by the words, right? Because I was the same as you. We're like, growing up, my mom was like, I heard God say this and
Yeah.
and there was an explanation as to like, okay, does he like talk to you? Is it like
Right.
you open up the Bible and he showed you this certain verse, which my
Right.
mom will say does happen to her. That's never happened to me. But again, kind of that like call back to everyone's path to holiness, and the relationship with God is specific and unique and special. And that is so powerful because I prayed for joy. I asked the Holy Spirit to give it to me, and it happened like that. And I can't tell you the day. I can't tell you the hour. I just know that doesn't mean that I'm like walking around like, if like I just stay up all night like I did last night with my my 1-year-old because he was very sick. I'm not like, this is amazing. I am simply in surrender to every single thing that I do. Every time I go through suffering, every time I do something that I don't want to do, I can use that because of my Catholic faith. And it tells me I can use those things to do something for others.
Yeah.
I can offer up my staying up all night to all of the souls in purgatory that I want to pray for, right? I'm going through the suffering. It is not fun staying up with a 1-year-old when you are tired yourself.
Yeah.
And I can do those things, right? And through that understanding of suffering, that joy just kept staying. And that was how God talks to me, right? He's not actually telling me things. It's little pulls, little pushes, little inklings of like, maybe I should get on social media and start talking about Catholic stuff.
Yeah.
And I literally combated that forever. I was like, that sounds weird, God. I hate social media. It's disgusting. It's a terrible place.
Yeah.
Why would you have me do this? So I just started, I started my account in January of 2023. Didn't really do anything on it. I was just like, okay, God, I did it.
Wait,
What do
you
you want me to do?
started it this year?
Oh yeah. Yeah. This was like, January I started posting. Like,
Oh, you've got like 10,000 followers.
I think it's 17 now, but yeah.
Whoa, really?
Yeah, I think it's gone up now.
Oh,
But
wow.
that's the thing. That's not, I mean, I know this sounds very like charismatic Catholic. It's not me. It's not. Like I don't look at my analytics. I have talked to so many people on Instagram that have been successful, and I'm like, what do you do? Like I feel like I'm kind of like just walking in and everybody's in a meeting and I'm like, what are we talking about? Because
Right.
like like everyone else has all the like, well, I do this. I post 2 times a day and I do this. And I was like, that sounds like a lot of work. Like
Yeah.
I just want to like I have a funny thought and I want to make it and then I'll do it. And I think for the first part of it, I did a little bit of like, okay, I'm going to post twice a day and do this.
Right.
But it kind of eventually went into where like I would just get on and the other thing for my Catholic therapist that I love, she's amazing, is that she'd be like, do not create when you have been consuming the wrong thing. Do not create if you've been scrolling through Instagram, looking at what other people are doing and trying to get the followers, right? She was like, that's not coming from a place of God, right? That's the other thing. She goes, you need to be careful of that because Instagram is a dangerous place. It fuels ego. It fuels a lot of stuff. And so my best content that has done the best and the times that I've got is because I was listening to Catechism in a year beforehand, had just listened to a Pints of Aquinas podcast, had prayed the Rosary. I had, prayed with my kids, like something, what I consumed was then that was what's fueling it.
Yeah.
So yeah, when I say that that's not me, I mean, people are like, what's your strategy? I'm like, God, I don't know. Like, I don't know what to say. But going back to like what you were saying about God, hearing God, like, I feel you. I felt that for so long. My brothers and I were all frustrated with my mom. We're like, you told us that prayer was like this. And that's not what prayer, like, that's not how it works. Prayer is a connection with God, but it is not immediate and instant gratification the way we have as humans. And that's why it's hard. That's why it's hard.
Yeah.
It's
100%.
hearing a voice. It's sometimes a feeling. Sometimes it is a Bible verse. That's why it's important to read the Bible every day and to say the Rosary every day, because if you're not immersing yourself in it, how is God? I mean, God does talk to some, you in different ways, like, bringing people into your life. Like you were saying, like sometimes you're like praying for something and you kind of a saint pops up and you're like, oh, okay, Saint Joseph. Maybe I need to start looking into Saint Joseph. Maybe God's not going to make you. My bad.
That's
My
funny.
bad. um, which so yeah, so sometimes that can kind of stay that way. So I'm really glad you said that, because that was how it was for me. I don't get these like whispers from
Right.
God. It is kind of their feelings and like a way of being, kind of, when
I
it
think my
comes to
mom
that.
gets those whispers. I think definitely she does.
Yeah.
What kind of liturgy do you guys go to?
So we attend a Reverent Novus Ordo. It's not as reverent as the parish we went to previously.
Okay.
However, and this is like a good topic, people are really up in arms about, you know, uh, their liturgical camp, if you will. And I think it's funny because the priest that was there before we got there was not very reverent, right? So
Mhm.
there's actually a cross up. This is one of the reasons why I don't take pictures of inside my church, because people be like, that's gross. But the cross that's in my church is a resurrection cross, which
Okay.
I don't, yeah, we don't like. And even the priest currently does not like it. It's like Jesus coming up off the cross.
Right.
Um, but the old pastor, the old Monsignor did it. And so when
Mhm.
the new priest came in, he's like doing all kinds of new things. He, does the consecration in Latin. There's a lot of more incense than there used to be. Like, I'm very excited. So we it's not, there is no place to kneel for to receive the Eucharist. So but I just kneel. I'm
Yeah.
probably one of the only people that do it. But like, what, I don't need to go travel. I'm probably getting, get a lot of flack for this. I don't need to travel 2 hours to a TLM to
Right.
get the experience, the experience that I want.
Sure.
TLM is great. I mean, it's beautiful. But it's like someone's like, "Well, I attend a Novus Ordo. I can't kneel." Yes, you can.
Yes, you can.
Like,
Yeah.
yeah, I've never been denied. And if I did, I would simply get up, I would shake my head, I would walk to my seat, and I would make an appointment with the priest to have a discussion.
Yeah.
Um, you know,
I take it on the tongue, which is I feel like I think I'm probably the only one at
yeah,
my mass who probably does it, and I make it a point to hold my daughter because I want people like, "Oh, he's holding his daughter." Like, that's the way he does it, but I I make it a point, like, that's why, especially to all the men who are sitting back there with us who have kids, hold your daughter, take it on the tongue. She gets
yeah,
old enough to start walking with you, still take it on the tongue, I think.
yeah.
Um, and
It's a great example. Good for you.
I think so, but I don't do it so that other people look at me like, "Oh, look at me, like, I'm better."
No, but I mean by that is that, though, I have a lot of people that are like, "Oh, they're embarrassed." Like, what if it's going to cause a scene, a show? Like, I'm going to make a statement, and I'm like, "Well, if you're doing it to make a statement, then yeah, that's wrong. But if
Yeah.
you're doing it because you realize what you're receiving and what's in
Yes.
front of you, and you want to show reverence,
Yeah.
that's also a good example to other people to go, "Oh, that mom just knelt down and there's no kneelers to receive. That's
Right.
interesting. I'm curious about that." And maybe it'll spark something in their head to go look it up. So yeah, that's what I mean by it.
As Catholics, like the 2 of us, we have kids, and we're not young. Well, you know what I mean, okay? We're not younger. It's very, very interesting. I try to stay up on as much as I possibly can, but with so many things going on, what type of liturgies to go to? SSPX, what's going on over there? Oh, no? No good? Oh, but it is g but wait, they seem super reverent. Okay, they're doing they have, like, really, really strict, like, um, they follow masses, like, from what I hear, it's like the SSPX, they'll th those are, like, the kind of masses you want to go to just because of how reverent they are and how strict to, I guess, the history of masses, especially like Latin masses are. But
Yeah.
there's still like I think the church, the TLM church that's by us is FSSP, and then I go to a Novus Ordo parish, and then sometimes maybe once a week. I haven't done it in a while. I would go to a TLM like early in the morning during the week. It's just like how as Catholics, like, does it matter which liturgy we go to, or is it like what's good enough? You know what I mean? Like, because I'm not an expert.
Yeah.
So I know that there are problems with SSPX. I know, and I want to get guests to talk about that because I know that they're out of communion with Rome. So I obviously don't want to do something that would put my soul into danger. But what can we do? How are we able to stay up on every new happening that's going on within the Catholic Church? How are you able to do so?
Yeah. So growing up, there's a lot of different people have, cradle Catholics have different experiences growing up. Mine was always Novus Ordo.
Mhm.
However, my Italian grandmother, who is like the matriarch of the family, they did do a more it wasn't a traditional Latin mass, but it was definitely that closer to that liturgy. Like the priest did face um away from the congregation
Mhm.
and things like that. So I I really don't know if I can speak to in intelligibly, I guess, speak to the correctness of a lot of those things, those different liturgies. Uh, However, I will say that the thing I do know that helps with that is that I don't really have to know. I mean, you can know what is, if you understand what a reverent Novus Ordo is, that's really all you need to know. And from
Mhm.
there, you can then go more towards, okay, well, I really like the Byzantine, right? And I really,
Right.
like there's no, at that point, then there is no going towards something that is heretical or in schism,
Right.
it helps you to understand that uh, there is no, and it's hard too. I'm trying not to like be insightful, I guess, but I don't, there is not like, I think you had the Catacomb Diaries on here, and he said it really well, where it's,
Yeah.
they're not better than the other, they're both valid, right?
Right.
But what I've said before is that what I look to is that there isn't issues in regards to the way we revere and worship God in the TLM, but there
Yeah.
is in the Novus Ordo. So that doesn't mean that that's right and the Novus Ordo is wrong. It's that, okay, well, let's fix the things that are in the
Yeah.
Novus Ordo and like, let's fix those things. Okay. Because then we kind of elevate both of them to the extent that some people do prefer the Novus Ordo and some people do prefer the TLM, but that doesn't mean that they're holier or better or that they love God more, right?
Right.
As long as it's reverence,
Yeah.
and then you're doing what God wanted us to do. And we talk about that quite a bit in, my comment sections where people are like, it doesn't matter where you worship or what church you go to. And you're like, no, it does.
Yeah.
There is a disconnect with God told us how he wanted to be worshiped very specifically. And let's not ignore God because it's in the Bible. Um,
Yeah, it's
but
it's very interesting. There are things that are missing from the Novus Ordo from our parish, like, growing up for the longest time as altar boys, there are things that happen during mass that are just not happening. Um, and I don't know if this is recent, or I don't know if it's just at this parish. I don't know, but there are no bells rung during the communion. Are there still for yours?
yes, yeah, they do ring
Yeah,
the
there are no
bells.
bells. I know what's going on. So what I do is I strike my breast. I like when I took that from TLM. You know what I mean? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
I thought
I like
there's
that.
just certain things that are so when the priest walks down the aisle at the TLM, everyone bows to the priest as he walks by. You kind of like take little things like that and I bring it over. If that
Hmm.
makes any sense. I don't know if
Yes,
it's
yeah.
wrong. I don't know if I should be doing that, but it
No,
kind of
it's
like
totally
helps
right.
me
I mean,
connect.
yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. It's kind of like during mass, whenever the priest says Jesus' name, I bow my head. Whenever he says
Mhm.
Mary's name, I bow my head. I'm not like very, obvious about it, but it's these little things that help us stay focused on why we are there. I mean, I have these conversations with my kids all the time. Mass is boring. It's not fun. I don't like it. And people go, "Oh no, my kid's gonna, my kid's gonna be a heretic." But
Right.
really, it's that you have to understand. For the longest time, people are just told that it's supposed to be fun and that we are supposed to be entertained, and that's not what worship is. If
Wait,
someone's
who
like,
says that? Who says it's supposed to be fun?
"Oh man," I mean, insert every mega church you've ever,
Well, okay,
ever
yeah, that's the problem. I don't feel like I am there to have fun.
right.
I don't feel like my relationship with God is this fun thing. I don't think it's supposed to be this fun thing. I'm supposed to think, or I do think that it's supposed to be this very serious thing that I don't take lightly. I can find immense happiness in it, 100%, but I don't think it should be fun.
I think it's just it depends. We need to be careful about our words, and this is like this kind of is in the same vein of biblical gender roles. And when as Catholics, I find it these hard set definitions of things, right? So they have to be
Mhm.
like, no, your relationship with God has to always be reverent, and that's true. But that doesn't mean that you can't have a lighter like. Let me explain this in the best way I can possible. Every single one of my children is born in October, all of
Mm.
them. And, if you were going to press me and my husband and say which one of the, which, was that planned? Because that's my favorite thing that I get asked. And I always say it was someone's plan, that was
Yeah.
like, there's, we are open to life. And the fact that our children are all born in October without the meticulous, like, nature of us being like, this is when we are going to have all our children. I think that's humor with God. I think
Yeah.
that is where God and I have a relationship where we just laughed. My husband and I laughed about it. We were like, man, God is so funny. And so, there is a lot of a relationship with God that you have to understand that it's confusing and altogether simple at the same time.
Can
That,
you talk to my wife for a second? I I got her a veil, and I know she's like, "Oh, why are you bringing this up again?" But it's just it's in good fun because she listens to the show,
yeah,
um, and I really want her to start wearing it, but I think she's a little maybe a little bashful to say it right now because like I said, we're back in the narthex. No one veils at our church.
mhm,
No one veils, and I think she might feel a little bit
like a
of
zealot.
yeah, not even that, but almost like not a spectacle either, but kind of having a lot of eyes on her for
Yeah,
veiling.
yeah.
As a
And
woman
that's
who does veil
promise.
and who does go to a Novus Ordo, do you have any sort of maybe, comforting words or any sort of, what can I say, support maybe to try and push her to
Yeah.
she doesn't have I want her to wear it for me, you know what I mean? I think that's my personal feelings about it, but
And you want her to wear it for you. Why?
I
Like, why do you want her to wear it? I'm curious.
because I think and because I feel like it would make maybe the family appear in God's eyes as more holy, if that makes any sense.
Okay. Okay.
It has nothing to do with me. You do this for me because
Right.
I'll feel a certain way.
Yeah.
It's not that I'll feel a certain way about myself. It's I want us to kind of like feel a way about us as a family,
Mm.
as a family of God.
Yeah. Yeah. I can see that. Um, and that was, yeah, I was curious about that. I have no, no point on that. Basically, my advice and my tips would be that very clearly my husband wasn't the one pressing me to do that.
Right.
However, he didn't say a word about it. I mean, I literally just started veiling one day. I bought a veil. It stayed on after I saw that woman prostrate herself wearing a veil, stayed on my dresser for 2 months maybe.
Mhm.
And then one day I just thought, you know what? It's not what I just thought. I was reading Crossing the Threshold of Hope by St. Pope John Paul II. And his pretty famous, like, words, the phrase that he used all the time was "be not afraid." And that was just ringing in my head
Mhm.
when it was that, Sunday. And I was like, okay, here we go. Is this the day? And then it was just St. John Paul II saying, "Be not afraid." And I just did it. I mean, I can't even say that there's probably people who look at me. I am probably the only person under 80 that bails. And I'm
Yeah.
that, like, there isn't a lot of women that bail even to that extent.
And I
Um,
understand that. I understand that like maybe that little kind of like little embarrassment of like, oh, I'm the only one.
Yeah.
Why
But
isn't there anyone?
it has to be something she feels called to. That's what I say. I'm like,
Exactly. Right.
a lot
And
of people
and I think
put a
she's
veil.
yeah, right. She said something along those lines, and I just
Yeah.
don't wanna push. I just want her to be tried so bad.
But,
You know?
it really, it's like I veil, but I'm not, and I don't have a brown scapular. My best friend does not veil, and she is enrolled in the brown scapular. It's
Mhm.
not a devotion I feel called to right now. I don't know if I ever will, and if I do, okay, great. But
I have
devotions, and that's the great thing about the Catholic faith, and this actually kind of ties into what I want to talk about next, which is that it's so there's a and I talk about this, I don't even know if this is a good analogy, but my husband and I are very big into analogies. Catholicism is like the cookie dough, the recipe for this, just like the best cookie dough you've ever had in your life, right? The best
Mhm.
cookie. Once you have the ingredients for that recipe and you've made your cookie dough,
Yeah.
you can use so many different cookie cutters to cut your cookies into whatever shapes you want.
Mm.
So, meaning that there is so much individuality that is presented to us through our free will of Catholicism. Again, there's certain things that are hard and fast, but most of it after that is really so individual. Devotions are just beautiful because they are so personal. Some people have a really, really beautiful dedication to the rosary, and that's their devotion. And now we should pray the rosary, every day. That's a great, good thing.
Mhm.
But some people have a greater devotion to the Divine Mercy. There's so many different devotions that you could not. I mean, you could do all of them, maybe, but maybe if you were
There's a
in like
lot.
a holy order and you had time.
Yeah.
But that kind of ties into the biblical gender roles thing, which I just feel so passionate about, because as I went on Instagram and I saw these, and this is no shade to the women who have these accounts, it really is not. And in fact, the point of my whole spiel here actually uplifts them in this way. I see these more tratty, if you will, accounts promoting traditional femininity, meaning as a mother, I have to wear dresses every day and put on makeup every day and
Mhm.
present myself well to my husband. I may, and there's so many other things that I've seen in that same, umbrella. And then I started my kind of journey, and I don't really wear dresses. I wear combat boots to church with my veil.
Mhm.
And maybe that's why no one has said anything to me about my veil. But it is sort of this idea that American culture has touted gender roles as a means of salvation. Like that's kind of the feeling that I started to get, and it started to make me feel like ick. Where I was like,
Mm.
okay, there's nothing wrong with being a like loving traditional femininity, if that's what you want to call it. Where it's like, women wear dresses and women, stay at home, and you're a homemaker and you bake bread and you make your own bread starter. And you homeschool. There's all these things that I started seeing, these boxes that some women were putting women into, or at least these women were presenting their lives and women were taking it that way. I don't
Mm.
think a lot of these women were doing it purposely. And then women started to feel like, okay, well, I don't do that. I'm a working Catholic mom. I'm a mom that has one kid that's
Mhm.
Catholic because of, insert whatever, like either infertility issues, child loss, what have you. And they were all coming to my page and kind of messaging me like, thank you. I feel like I actually started to feel bad. Like people started to make me feel like my crosses, which are like, maybe struggling with infertility, maybe that you had to work as a mom, for whatever reason,
Yeah.
that was a sin, when it's actually not. That's not a sin, it's a cross. There's ways that it can be a sin if you're using contraception, and that's why you have a limited amount of children. If you are working because you want to uplift a really extravagant lifestyle, instead of just providing for your children, like, yeah, those things can kind of delve into the areas of sin. So
Mm.
there is a lot of detail into it. But when we create that environment where it's me being a good Catholic woman or a good Catholic man means this, and here are your boxes, and jump into them, then we are actually not combating the current gender ideology in our environment. We are giving them fuel for it. And what I mean by that is that uh, when you force Catholic men and women into these little boxes, it's robbing them of the unique gifts that our church gives us, right? The individual gifts. We can look to the saints for this pretty easily, right? We can, I bring up this all the time when people disparage my interfaith marriage. Saint Monica, who is the patron saint of difficult children and husbands. Uh, she was married to essentially a pagan.
Mhm.
And she not only produced Saint Augustine, but through her unceasing prayer and devotion to our Lord, he converted. Her husband converted like a year before he died.
Oh.
And so, and then you can look at Saint Joan of Arc, right? She was very
Mhm.
different than a lot of the other, than Mary, right?
Mhm.
She was very similar to Mary in a lot of ways, but she was also very different than Mary in a lot of ways. So we can look at these saints and see the individuality of the way that they loved God, and God called them closer to Him, and know that there is so much room for all of the gifts that we have that we don't know what to do with when it comes to being a male or female. So I really like to bring up Edith Stein,
Mhm.
because I have her essays on women, and her quote where she speaks about basically how if we don't give ourselves to God when it comes to what our femininity and masculinity means, that we're surrendering ourselves to someone else or something else, which can be eventually gender, this ideology of the secular world, right? I am a woman and I like video games. I like cigars. I like scotch. I don't like sports, but I can see these things in myself and go, those are feminine. But why are they feminine? Well, St. Pope John Paul II tells us that it is the acts are gendered by the sexed body, right? We are not gendered. Like if my husband is cooking and cleaning and holding my baby and cooking dinner,
That doesn't make him a woman.
That's masculine. But
Right,
no,
yeah.
that's what a woman does. No, that's not. It's masculine because he is a male, because he has a penis, right? Like he's a male. He was born male. So those things are masculine. And the same goes for women that are in meetings, being assertive and running a staff meeting. She experiences the same, exudes the same femininity doing those things as she does breastfeeding. And so that's the true beauty of Catholicism and these teachings on theology of the body and the feminine genius by St. Pope John Paul II, is that we can actually combat this ideology we see in our culture without going in the opposite direction, which is, no, this is what it means to be a woman. No, this is what it means to be a man. And that is really beautiful. And then I messed up this, but Edith Stein said, but this surrender becomes a perverted self-abandon and a form of slavery when it is given to another person and not to God. At the same time, it is an unjustified demand which no human being can fulfill, which is so pertinent because when you go online and you're a Catholic woman or you're a Catholic man and you're, maybe you're a revert, you're like, what does it mean to be a Catholic man? Let's see. And you go on and you see all these things and maybe they don't match up with kind of the man that you are. Then you kind of start to doubt certain things. You doubt your manlyhood, doubt your dignity. And that's what Satan wants, right? He wants us to doubt our dignity because it all comes back to dignity. I mean, truly, all of it does. So with that teaching that I explained about St. Pope John Paul II, we can look at that teaching and it can greatly explain our child that's a boy that likes pink, that likes to play pretend or dress up, as some people call it, and that enjoys coloring and baking, right? And we can go, you're a boy and you like these things. So that still means you're a boy. And the girl that likes the tools, that likes the, sports, that doesn't really like pink, hello, me. And I can look at that and go, I am still a female.
Right.
Because I am female. Those things are not inherently male or female. And anyone that tells you that is wrong.
Yeah.
So when we look at that understanding of from Pope John Paul II, we can actually break down all of the misconceptions and the fear, because it's coming out of fear, right? Everyone is just really fearful. Your kid says something. I mean, I like to tell the story because I've told it before. My 5-year-old, when he was like 4, we watched Frozen, and he was just like mesmerized by the magic in it. And he came up to my husband and I and said, I want to be a girl. And my husband had a literal heart attack in front of me. He was just like, oh, and I go, oh, hold on. And now I am very obsessed with child psychology and psychology in general. So luckily I was really well versed in this prior to this event. And I simply asked him a few questions. Why do you want to be a girl, baby? Well, because Elsa's a girl. Okay, well, but why though? Like, Elsa's a girl, but what's better about Elsa? Well, she has magic. And and so he had never been presented with, and I have a whole thing about the media portraying how they portray boys, because everyone got all obsessed about how there's no strong female roles, but in reality there was no strong male roles. There was females being saved by a B character coming in at the last second, kissing her, and she came back to life, but he was not a main character, right? The boys are like, oh, I just come up and I kiss her, okay, I don't know. So there is a lacking, and I don't know what I'm going to do about it, but I want to do something about it. Lacking of strong, healthy little boy roles in movies and stuff. But he saw this girl with this thing that he wanted, and he had his underdeveloped brain had no way to go, oh, boys can do that too. He thought, I like magic. That means I must be a girl. I
Right.
want to be a girl. And so it was a simple thing is like my husband and I are like, okay, I guess Harry Potter is something we can like show him, in like
But
little
that's
stuff.
modern feminism, isn't it? Isn't it? That's like, these men are able to do all these things, we must now need to be men, right?
Yes.
We must be
Yeah.
treated like
Yeah.
men in society, where it's like,
And
well,
I don't even say
no,
that's even modern feminism, right? That's
just
second
feminism
wave.
in general.
Yeah, that's second wave, right? And I used to have that I was a Catholic feminist in my profile, and I still stand by it because I don't think that feminist it's a dirty word now, but it doesn't have to be. Because
Mhm,
originally, the feminists that were fighting for women's the right to vote, yeah, they got it wrong because a lot of their notions were women should have the right to vote, and they were kind of simultaneously talking about the breakdown of the nuclear family, right? The
mhm.
breakdown of like what womanhood is and motherhood and all of that. So I do think you can take back the word. I do. I mean, people do it all the time. Why can't I take back that word, right? My Catholic feminism is based off of feminine genius. So I did change it to feminine genius in my profile just for better clarification because I was tired of people messaging me about it. But um
Right, it's just, well, like you said, the word has become dirty. If you were to say that you were a Catholic feminist, people would probably get the impression like, "Oh, she," what's her stances on abortion, or, the pill, or anything like that, or
And I
contraception.
actually
They would ha
loved that.
Right,
I love being kind of an oxymoron because it makes people ask me questions that they normally wouldn't, right? Like
right,
someone would be like, "Oh, you're a Catholic feminist. So what is your view on abortion then?" When if I just said I was Catholic, they probably would have just like stayed away from it because they would have been
sure.
like, "I know what she's going to say." And so then I can kind of present them with all of my knowledge about, abortion,
With
which I
sex,
think
oh, you're a
that's
Catholic feminist? You support sex work.
yeah. Oh gosh.
Oh,
Well, sex work
no.
is work. That is the greatest joke I've ever heard in my entire life. But and actually that was something that we wanted to talk about. Remember that I wrote down. I think one of the things we were discussing about abortion was the criminalization of it. Like with
Oh, yeah, that's something that we disagreed on, right?
yeah, like I think that your viewpoint was
It was the abolitionist viewpoint that not only should it be abolished, but there needs to be some sort of, legal recourse against women who have abortions.
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And is that still your stance?
Yeah, I think, but it's not it w I think it would probably be the woman who is countless who just keeps on having abortions. Like, at some
Right.
point, it's like, "Okay, you cannot contribute to society in this way, or actually eliminate from society in this way. You obviously need to spend time in prison, because I don't think it's reserved for the woman who probably has to make a really, really tough decision and has no support group around her whatsoever, and she has an abortion. I'm not gonna throw that woman in jail. I'll throw the abortionist in jail, but I'm not gonna throw the woman in jail. I think once it just starts to become flippant, and for people to publicly, let's say, shout the abortions, I'm like, jail.
Yeah. So the thing I have to say about that, and that makes sense, what you said, it does make sense, but there's a part of it I think that is missing, which
Mhm.
is the empathetic approach, right? Because and I, would assume someone else would go, oh, how am I supposed to be empathetic for someone that just keeps killing their child, right?
Right.
They're just evil. But from my experience in the abortion, not the abortion industry, in the pro-life movement and with the abortion industry, and that has been 23 years since I was like 11. My mom was very involved, and that is such a blessing that I thank her for. I mean, when Roe got overturned, I bought a very expensive bottle of champagne and I brought it to my parents' house with my husband and my brothers, and we all cheers. And I thanked my parents for being on the right side of history and
Nice.
for instilling that in me. And it's just such a gift. So because of my time in that, and actually, the ex Planned Parenthood director, Abby Johnson,
Mhm.
um, the people who had a hand in her stepping down are the ones who mentored me.
Mm.
And that was probably another great gift that I was given because they did such a good job of training me. Where I was sort of thrown in right away, and I had an experience where I was speaking with we call him a dad because he was a dad,
Yeah.
a young dad that what didn't want his girlfriend to kill his child, and he was bawling to me behind the gate, because they wouldn't. Thanks, Bill Clinton. This gate, and he was bawling to me about what can I do? Like, she's in there, and there's nothing I can do, and it destroyed me to where I went to my mentor and I said, I don't think I can do this. That was the hardest. I didn't know what to say to him. What do you say to a guy who right behind him, his child is being murdered and he can't do a
Yeah.
single thing? I mean, what am I supposed to do? And I had this wonderful mentor that just shared with me the empathetic nature of, we're not just trying to save the babies, we're
Yeah.
trying to save these people.
Hmm.
And that just shifted my mindset. And I was just trained really well in the idea of, and this is kind of from my own personal thought of it too, especially from a Catholic perspective, that you do not focus on the baby, you focus on the woman. And you said, like, sometimes it can be like the woman didn't have support and that happens so much. And she had her parents or friends or boyfriend saying, get an abortion, it will ruin your life if you don't.
Right.
I'm not even speaking to those women. I'm speaking to the women that, and we've seen videos of these, especially from conservative accounts, where they go and they talk to people on the street, and there's that
Right.
woman that say something to, and it's not even an insightful comment. It's something like, do you think abortion should be whatever? And they just you see the rage and the hate in their face and their eyes. They get
Yeah.
emotional about it. And those are the women who've had abortions. And those
Yeah.
are the women that we need to cater to. And when I say cater to, I mean that we need to understand where they're coming from first. Because if you don't understand where they're coming from, you're never going to reach them. What's the point in
Yeah.
even talking to them, right?
Yeah.
And the way I kind of present it is that, what is easier, right? A woman who has to reconcile with the idea that she killed her own child, or believe the guise of that it's under women's health care, that it's a pro-woman thing, that it's empowerment, and that it was good, which is easier to believe, right?
Yeah.
Mentally, I'm talking about, like, psychologically speaking, your brain will go towards the thing that is not going to mentally F you up.
Right.
And that's
Right.
the wrong area, right?
Yeah.
And Abby Johnson talks about it too, because she had plenty of abortions, and she approved all of these abortions.
Right.
So, women that come out and speak out against it, like, I am so impressed by that bravery. That is a virtue there for that.
Did
So
you
we have,
did you watch the Hulu documentary with Pope Francis, the recent one?
I haven't yet. I've been meaning to watch it. I was going to I wanted to listen to the Matt Fradd, like, explanation of it first. And then watch
Okay.
it. I
It's
saw the clip of where he talked to, he spoke to it,
Yeah.
the girl that was talking about it.
I thought he was really good on it, and I think he
Yes,
said, we cannot reject the women who have these abortions.
right.
We need to be there in order to comfort them. I think that's what he said. A lot of Christians are probably missing out on that aspect, and I don't think I would ever condemn a woman for not condemn. I think you have to kind of condemn the action, right? I don't think I would judge the woman, because it's not my job to do so. I could judge the action and say, that's wrong. That
Mhm.
action is wrong. That's an unjustified killing of another human being. However, I would try to be as loving to that person as possible, because I think, if they're confronted by anti-abortion activists or abolitionists who don't have any compassion for them, then their minds are never going to be changed. That's why what's good about Free the States, I don't know if you've watched any of those videos, but they are abolitionists. They are very kind, and they're very patient, and they're very
Okay.
empathetic.
Yeah.
They just tell you, it's wrong. But they will also tell you, we've helped many women. We've adopted these children personally. We've helped them find placement for these adoptions personally. We've helped women find jobs once they've had the children. It's like, and that's what doesn't get shown to the
Yeah.
general audience. What gets shown is, people, boycotting the abortion clinics or the fire bombs and all that kind of stuff. But the
Right.
really
They don't
empathetic
hear
people
about the
don't get
things
shown.
that help women. They don't hear about Project Rachel, which helps women after they've had abortions with post-abortive counseling.
Hmm.
And there's literally zero pro-choice organizations that do that, because then they would have to admit as to what abortion
That
does.
messes up their money. Yeah.
Right. And so it's kind of super sad, because it's like, when they were having the formula shortage, pro-life organizations were on the ground running, and pro-choice organizations can't do that because they're not pro-baby at all. They are pro-abortion. And that's the
Mhm.
thing that's really hard to talk about too, is that convincing someone to understand that pro-choice, when it comes to the organizations, it's not. It's
Yeah,
pro-abortion,
no.
because you can't be both. You just can't, because of the foundation of what Planned Parenthood especially is. And especially like you said, I think the thing that I share with my friends quite a bit. So my best friend is actually pro-choice. Like, she is very pro-choice.
Mm-hmm.
And people have a hard time understanding how I can be best friends with someone like that. And it's because of my time in that industry, understanding that I know why she's pro-choice. It's not, it's not that like, it's like, I'm pro-choice because of women's right to choose. No. I know the real reason.
Yeah.
I know the nitty gritty behind the scenes childhood trauma stuff, why and
Yeah.
that's why it's so special to have these relationships with people who, maybe they're your friends, and they're pro-choice, and you're thinking, I don't know if I can just be friends with them anymore because they go and vote for this, but you have to stay in their lives because they're not going to hear it. They're good,
Right.
they're not going to hear it from anybody else, and they're not
Yeah.
going to. And it doesn't have to be about, when you spout the facts and the science, those are things they can deny, which is sad because that's like
Mm-hmm.
nowadays everything. But it's really important to ask like questions. It's really like the biggest tool and weapon that we have as humans. And we see this a lot with Matt Fradd too. It's like asking questions, and it's why podcasts are great, because when you ask questions, you get real, true answers. And if you keep asking questions, you get the deeper, truer answer.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of my experience when it comes to abortion. When I've talked to people, especially after Roe got overturned, I mean, it was like I felt like I was talking about it for weeks afterwards because people just wanted to try and prove me wrong.
Right.
And that was not my case. My case wasn't like, I mean, I know you're wrong, so I don't have to prove that to you that I'm right, because it's just very simple, right? It's very simple to explain that it's a human life. Science tells us that. It's very simple to explain what abortion does. It ends a human life.
Mm-hmm.
So then once you focus on you keep the focal point on that, then it kind of comes around to, well, what makes you feel like this should ever be okay?
Right.
And at that point, then you start to see where their logic is really emotional when it comes to abortion. And it really helps you as the pro-lifer to make them feel heard and seen and loved to an extent. Like, I'm sorry that you had, past sexual trauma. I mean, that's constant when I talk to, especially in college, man, it was just like, well, why wouldn't I be pro-choice if I had been sexually abused,
Right.
And so to speak to the human first is really important if you're going to actually change minds. Because I hear a lot of people go, nope, we're not going to change minds, moving on. And that's partly true, because we need to focus on the generation that hasn't had abortions yet to
Mm.
convince them that, okay, this is bad. It's not good. The depression, the
Right.
suicide rates, the science, everything behind it. But you still need to try, as a Catholic especially, to reach the soul. Because the babies, right? The babies that are
Yeah.
dying, they're going right back to their creator, right?
What are the
Um,
abortion rates? Not the abortion rates, the suicide rates among women who've had
you
abortions.
know what? I don't have them on me right now, but they're pretty
Mm.
significant. Let me think real quick. I want to say that women that wanted it, that like wanted the abortion, it wasn't something they felt like they were forced
Right.
into. Um, don't quote me on this. I want to say it was in the 30s, like 30%. And the
Attempts
women
or actual suicides?
I
I
want
think
to say
that would
no.
probably impact the numbers a little bit differently.
Yeah,
Like attempts.
I want to say this was attempts, but I'm
Okay.
not sure. I literally just looked this up and I didn't print it out. I was just kind of looking
That's
over it.
fine.
But either way, let's just say it's attempts, right? Let's just
Right.
focus on attempts, right? Let's say it's 30% were attempting it for the ones that did want it. And the
Right.
ones that didn't want it, it was like 60s, in the 60s.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
And so, I mean, it's kind of interesting because somebody's like, oh, it's just a procedure. What medical procedure? And I'm sure there's a few, because it's like, any procedure that messes with your body. But what medical procedure gives you that kind of numbers in terms of increase in depression, increase in suicide, increase of mental health issues? Like, none.
I know
So
another one.
what?
I know another type of medical procedure that does that.
What?
Oh, sex reassignment.
Oh, sure. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks for the
I thought
correction.
you were going to be like super quick with it. Do you
Yeah.
have any questions from your question block that you posted?
So someone did ask, and actually that's kind of interesting because it actually does have to do with, I think that contraception and abortion and then the gender ideology thing kind of
Yeah.
all go together. So
Mhm.
someone did ask specifically to answer a question about that they are Catholic and that their spouse is not, and that their spouse wants to get a vasectomy.
Yeah.
And what do they do? Especially like, again, when it's the male. And so you're like, well, if he just, if he goes and gets it without speaking to you about it. Of course, that is nothing on you,
Right.
spiritually. And that is something that you can definitely pray about. And I would say that a husband that goes and gets a vasectomy without speaking with his wife, there's probably deeper problems that need to be resolved before that spiritual,
Hmm.
teaching. But and I think that even the follower mentioned that she was like, I understand because I have some mental health issues. I struggle
Okay.
with depression. And this is it's such a, not a hard topic, but just a complex topic when it
Hmm.
comes to using NFP within Catholic marriages. My husband was like, had never heard of it before, right? He was a Protestant. I met him. I was like, listen, we're not going to be using contraception if we get married. That was one of the questions that we spoke about.
Oh, really?
And yeah, and he was like, why? That doesn't even make sense. Like, who cares? God doesn't care. And then I showed him Humana Vitae. We looked over Theology of the Body. We read a couple of other writings that were really important and impactful. And it took about a year and a half or 2 years almost where he finally, after, it took us that long to kind of go through them. I wasn't like one
Hmm.
weekend. He was like, yep, I get it. And to this day, he will he works for in the tech industry, and people are always like, wow, you have 4 kids and your wife wants more. Good Lord. And he's kind of like, this is something that I think St. Pope Paul II said, but he says it, which is funny because I think I said it to him, but a lot of people amass wealth um, for their children after they're gone, right? They
Right.
want to give a little nest egg, right? And that's good. But the greatest wealth that you can give your children is siblings. And that is
Um,
that's how it's hard. But when it comes to being open to life, that not only behooves your children with siblings, and let's say it doesn't even produce siblings, it behooves your marriage because you are not separating the procreative from the unitive. So
yeah.
what that means is that by rid, getting rid of the procreative nature of it by getting a vasectomy, your husband then, and I say that meaning that if a wife or a husband has to get a vasectomy for a reason that is medically necessary, that has nothing to do with procreation, right? Like
Hmm.
sometimes women have to get hysterectomies for cancer, right?
Right.
Not the same thing. It does not
Hmm.
pertain to the Catholic teaching on contraception because you are doing it to not die. You are not doing
Right.
it to not have children. Just want to clarify that. So when the husband gets a vasectomy, it removes the procreative nature of the unitive act, and then you are then using your wife as an object.
Right.
And I think that across the board, and if that struggle ends up having to be, well, I have severe depression and we can't have children. Okay. That's where these beautiful gifts of the Holy Spirit come in, right? Self-control,
Hmm.
chastity.
Yeah.
Chastity is something we're just called to when we aren't married. And
Hmm.
my husband and I are practicing chastity right now. He is not in our house for the whole week. I cannot have sex. He cannot have sex. This is
Right.
chastity. And so I think that that's something that a lot of people forget, especially in our society where everything needs to be easy and good. That
Hmm.
kind of like it's the whole prosperity gospel feeling. People think that everything has to be easy, and
Right.
Catholicism just has this beautiful foundation of we know that living life and humanity is suffering because of the fall, and
Yeah.
because of that, there's going to be times when we have to suffer, and we can either suffer badly and let it turn into vices, or we can
Hmm.
suffer well and we can look to the saints for the how to suffer. We can suffer well and it can sanctify us. And
Yeah.
that is that's my favorite teaching, man. I used to be so bitter about so many things. When something bad would happen, I'd be like, why are you doing this to me, God? I was one of those people that thought God was like picking on me.
Right.
um, and I think that's a lot of people, like me and God are just not really close right now. He's just like doing all these things I don't get. And I really surrendered to the idea that God isn't doing these things to me. These things are just happening, and I can either use them in the way that God wants me to, biblically, by offering up my suffering, by suffering well, by letting it sanctify me and connect myself with the crucifixion and the suffering that Christ went through. Like, wow,
Hmm.
how special is that, and how beautiful is that? Or I can let it consume me and be unhappy for the rest of my life. I have this shirt that says, do what makes you happy, and the happy's crossed out. It says holy. And I get
Hmm.
so many comments on it. And I think my favorite thing to tell people is that, I will never be happy if I'm not striving for holiness. But if I'm striving for holiness, I can find happiness. And I think
I
that's
like that.
really the best way to describe Catholicism.
That's a good message. Uh, I have a message from your boy Mikey G, and he wants advice for those wanting to convert, but they're struggling with Marian doctrines.
Oh, love that. I get that a lot. I love it. Okay. So there is nothing wrong with converting before you are like totally engulfed in every teaching of the Catholic faith, right?
Hmm.
If you know that the Catholicism is true and that's what's drawing you towards it, convert, dude. Like convert and then figure out your, your issues with Mary later. Like there is nothing in the Catholic faith that goes against the Bible. And that's something that I always say when I have a lot of Protestant friends that struggle with the Mary thing, right? Because the propaganda is just like pressed into them. When you understand the Catholic perspective on Mary, like we talked about previously, then you can better understand the honor, the 10 Commandments, right? Everybody agrees with that. Honor thy father and mother. Okay, then it totally makes sense how you could honor. How do I honor my mom? How should I honor my mom? And again, there's nothing wrong with convert. I mean, I'm obsessed with conversion books. I just, again, everyone's, he thinks I'm a convert because I do this, but a lot of converts in my life. I'm obsessed with conversion books. And one of the best things I read was Abigail Favale's book, Into the Deep. And she converted before she even really believed in the Eucharist. And there's like one part in the book where she talks about, she was a Eucharistic minister. And she was like, body of Christ. And it's like handing it to people. And she said one day in the middle of it, she realized what she was holding and she broke out into a sweat and she's like shaking. I mean, like holding it and shaking. And so that kind of gives you an idea of how there's many people that convert because they know it's true. They just aren't sure yet.
Yeah.
How to marry the sureness of the truth with like all of the lies and the propaganda and the things, even the nostalgia of their Protestant childhood. That's a big thing too, to connect them. So I would say, go ahead and enroll in RCIA and just keep praying about it. There's a lot of ways.
Mikey G. Let's get Mikey G to convert. Someone wanted me to ask you about Richard Cranium. You know who that is. Brian has snuck into the chat.
What? Yeah, I asked them to give me some questions, and Brian sent me a picture of fries and a burger. And I'm not sure if that's because it's Friday or he was just being weird, but
yeah, I got two irrelevant questions that I'm not going to ask because they have nothing to do with this podcast. So, Saint Wave, our buddy Saint Wave says, Marie, what are the best movies from the 80s or earlier to watch as a family?
80s or earlier? Why can't they be? Oh yeah, he's all into the 80s. I was like, why can't they be before the 80s? Because we watched Chitty Chitty Bang Bang a lot, and I don't remember. That's not 80s. That's before the 80s.
Oh, we wore out our like Mary Poppins VHS. My little brother did. Ghostbusters was one that we watched as a family. I think the Protestants would probably be against Ghostbusters in a way. Like that's probably demonic, and it's just like no.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I get that stuff a lot with Harry Potter too. However, I did just read an article where someone interviewed J.K. Rowling, and she finally admitted to a lot of the Christian connections with Harry Potter.
Oh, really?
Yes, I'm totally going to talk about it in my stories today at some point because I was so excited about it because people are constantly like, those are spells, right? And I'm
right.
Okay, guys, like you understand that she made up a lot of them. Some of them are actually Latin, like Lumos, a lot of them are part Latin. She made them up. In addition to my children are very aware, that that's not real. And like, the thing I love is explaining it is just that God made our imaginations. And that is the coolest thing. Like he's such a scientist and an artist. Mm-hmm. He made our imaginations to come up with these beautiful works like Lord of the Rings and like Harry Potter, just because they aren't exactly C.S. Lewis and, Tolkien based doesn't mean that they aren't still using a gift that God gave them. And as long as they're not, if anything, Harry Potter points towards good. He talks about love overcoming evil, which God is love. So, you can easily connect that. But let me think of an 80s one that we watched recently. I'm very, very strict about what my kids watch, like very strict. Mm-hmm. Like I probably wouldn't let them watch Ghostbusters, not because it's like, like the occult and the ghosts and things like that. But because when I always rewatch everything before I show it to them, is it the way that a lot of the Hollywood shows people how they're treating each other really bothers me. It just really does.
Well, what about Ghostbusters shows that?
I know. So you don't think that. And then like you'll watch it again and maybe it'll say something like, yeah, you idiot or something like that.
Oh, I got you. Okay.
I mean, I know it's like, that's just me. It's not, that's just kind of my thing is that when they're this age, because like my kids are 7 and younger, right? So when they're older And also when I do catch those things, so sometimes they slip through, I'm always making sure I'm sitting with them and I can go, that's not very nice. We don't talk like that to people, right? 'Cause, and it really does, like the way that my boys, I have all boys, and people are like, ooh, boy, all boys rough, right? They're all crazy. And I'm like, they're really not. I've met a lot
Yeah.
of people that have girls that are crazier. And I think it's because of the way I tell them how to treat each other. They first learn how to have interactions and relationships through each other first. And a lot of that is mimicked from media.
Mhm.
And so, the 90s movies, like we just recently we had a movie night, and I finally let them watch The Little Mermaid.
Oh, how do they like it?
And they loved it. But the whole time I had to like constantly say things, I don't even remember what it was, but they would, there was a couple of things where the bird was saying really rude things to the crab, you know what I mean?
Right.
And it's like, that's going to come up, but at least I have to be able to have them know that they're old enough to be like, let's not talk about that. We did Little Mermaid. Chitty Chitty Bang Bang was the best. I'm sorry. It's the best. It's not 80s. And I know he
Yeah.
wanted that, but it's so good because it's very theatrical, and
Mhm.
there's songs in it.
Yeah.
And it's just very innocent and sweet. And I'm a big fan of Studio Ghibli as well, which
Yes.
is
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. Okay, good. I love that you know that is.
Yeah.
So I'm
Anime,
not huge on
Japanese.
anime, but
Right.
Studio Ghibli is different to me.
That
It's
Howl's Moving Castle?
Yes, House is a
Yeah.
little bit older, but Kiki's Delivery Service, Howl's Moving Castle, My Neighbor Totoro. My Neighbor Totoro is excellent for like 3-year-olds and up.
Really? Okay, I gotta
Yeah, I mean
my
it's definitely it's Japanese culture, so they do talk about like the forest gods and stuff, but
right.
like I mean, to each his own when it comes to Catholics being like, I don't
Was
want
Saintwave
to.
expecting, like, the never-ending story and stuff like that? Was or, like,
Oh, that one, that is a good one.
The
Although I do.
Princess Bride and stuff like that?
So I haven't done The Princess Bride yet because when I was little, we had a Mormon babysitter, and he was awesome. He was so cool. He would go to, I just, as heretical as the Mormons' teachings are, they're just good people.
Mhm.
And he brought in Princess Bride for us.
Yeah.
And I don't remember how old I was, but he would go to church every morning, like at 5 a.m. And I remember him telling us this. He was like, I go to church in the morning at 5 a.m. and then I come here to babysit you guys or whatever it was. And it just stuck in my head forever. I was like, wow, you're like 17. I don't know how old he was, but introduced me to Princess Bride. And I think I was probably 7 or 8 or something. I fell in love with it. So there's a lot of adult humor in it. So
Yeah.
I'm wary of that until they get older, but still great movies. Neverending Story. I think I might do that tonight. Now that he reminded me of it,
I don't
although
even
my
think I've
dog is
seen that whole thing.
scary.
My daughter's obsessed with The Yellow Submarine. She loves it, and she's obsessed with Cars. I don't know if you've
Like
like,
the
Disney
the movie.
Pixar, yeah,
Oh yeah,
Cars.
yeah, yeah. It's a
We
great. I mean, it's a great show. It's very.
we've
Uh,
tried to get her to watch Cars 2. We've tried to get her and she won't do
it's
it.
just Cars.
With Cars, yeah.
I love it. I love that. Yeah, it's funny. Like that's kind of going back to like my kids have never been interested in cars. The only one, my fourth boy, and it's only because there's construction going on behind our house, and so he sees
Mhm.
all the construction. That's the
Yeah.
only boy that's been interested in trucks and cars and stuff. It's been a lot of magic, and I'm really, so they're all born in October, so obviously Halloween, All Hallows Eve is really big at our
Oh,
house.
yeah. Yeah,
And
All Saints
and
Day.
I was born on All Saints Day,
Oh,
so
really?
yeah. And so we kind of like I was actually supposed to be born on Halloween, and my mom was like, "No devil baby." And so
So she
I
held
think
out for an extra day?
yeah, I think the doctor was like, "I can induce you." And she was like, "No, no, no." So I think I was born at like early in the morning on All Saints Day. And so
Mhm.
I always had a big love for Halloween. And that will show up definitely on my Instagram. And I can't wait for all the haters that are, don't like the costumes, because I'm also a huge Tim Burton fan, like huge Tim Burton fan. Uh,
Mm.
but I think that coincides with, and Brian and I from At Catholicism talk about this a lot, just the emo-ness and the metalness of Catholicism
Yeah.
uh, matches up, I think, with a lot of that. There's a lot of darkness.
Well, I spoke about this yesterday on the episode that ended up failing through our, digital equipment, which is so frustrating because we did talk about it, 'cause she's Catholic as well, Mary Morgan, and we did talk about, her interest in emo music, growing up, and I was like, "Yeah, Catholicism is, like, truly like the true
Yeah.
like goths and like the true emos. Like that seems like what
Yes.
Catholicism is.
Yeah, it's kind of like the joke I made when I first started doing Instagram, and I was showing, I wear combat boots to church, and I wear pants, and they're loose
Mhm.
fitting pants, and somebody was like, "That's wrong. Saint Padre Pio would have slapped you," and I'm like, "Okay, like I don't understand how you can look at that, but you don't look at Memento Mori and all of these other seemingly dark teachings, I guess you would say, but." I mean, I'm all about it. Like I have a skull pillow and a skull thing all around my house. And people are like, is that from Halloween? And I love it because it sort of, it encourages conversation about it. I'm like, no,
Mhm.
Memento Mori. And they're like, what? And I'm like, remember your death. And they're like, okay, that's weird. I'm like, it's not though. It's actually really cool. And,
Yeah.
kind of can like converse in that way. And I talked about that on a live stream the other day with Grassroots Catholic, where, our domestic churches can really resemble our faith. And it's why I don't have a problem with, I didn't have to let go of all, when I was in my youth, I really did. I loved all that emo music, and I loved Tim Burton. And I had a lot of
Mhm.
people telling me as I kind of, became on fire more. I don't call it a reversion. It's more like just, I let Christ into my heart. I
Yeah.
actually encountered Christ. I don't think I actually encountered Christ until a year or two ago, really, like meaning I like
Wow.
met him. I
Yeah.
knew of him. And a lot of things that people talk about on social media that are, in the Catholic sphere, at least, that they say are bad, are actually things that brought me into that encounter, like The Chosen. And, that was really a weird thing for me, the Chosen, and being able to come into comfortableness of my femininity and what that means. I love video games. I love scotch. I love cigars. I don't love baking bread, although I'm good at cooking, and I want that on the record. I'm not
Okay.
good at laundry,
You
things
can
like
have
that.
that. Yeah.
Yeah.
We got to get you on Pints with Aquinas so you can smoke a cigar with him.
Please. That is my dream. I am telling you, I don't even know how people get on Pints with Aquinas. I've like tried to message him. It doesn't work. I've been like, you have not talked about interfaith marriage on your show. I'm going to give you good content, bro. Like, this is good. No one talks about it. Everyone's all, no, 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 no. We don't want to talk about it. And like, I want to talk about it. I want to talk about, that it's not a sin, that it's, people like to, oh man, they like to throw all of the pre-Vatican II stuff at me, telling me I'm living in sin and that it's crazy. And I just, the amount of people that came to me when I started that were big Catholic accounts, and I won't, mention them, but they came to me and are like, thank you for talking about your interfaith marriage, because I get disparaged a lot and I have thick skin, so it doesn't bother me. But
Yeah.
the one thing that I do like is I like standing up for people. And I like that I was able to come on to social media and be that voice for these people who have big Catholic accounts, and a lot of people don't, maybe most people, their followers don't know that they're in interfaith marriage, and that there's
Mhm.
even some accounts who have just spoken like outwardly about, that this isn't good. Don't listen to her. That I've got a lot of comments about, it's bad that you're talking positively about your interfaith marriage. I'm
Oh,
like,
jeez.
well, it's marriage, so it's a vocation and a sacrament. So why can I talk
Right.
positively about it? I'm not saying that it's it is the ideal,
Right.
and that's kind of thing I always talk about. It's not the ideal, but you know what? Most marriages are not the ideal, and that's kind of the reality I want to bring into that conversation. So I would love, so everyone go on to Pints with Aquinas and type in the thing, have Marie from CatholicCaritas on your.
Yeah.
I would love it.
You should. Maybe I'll put in a good word.
Oh, please. Yeah. You know what?
We're
That's a question
best
I have for
buddies
you.
now. Yeah.
I actually started following you because of that clip that he talked about you, specifically
Oh,
you.
really? Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
He was like, Mike's a good guy. And I was like, who's Mike? And then I was like, and so I was like, I mean, I love Matt. And so I was like, if he thinks he's a good guy, Mike must be a good guy. So how did that whole thing happen?
I try to be a good guy. Well, I've always just wanted. I've never been scared of inviting anybody on to the show, but that I didn't even invite him on the show. It's Candace Owens' husband, who has been on his show a couple times, uh, was like, "Hey, he's going to be in Nashville. Do you? Can I maybe talk him into coming onto the show?" I was like, "Please,
Wait, so how do
please."
you know him?
Oh, they're friends.
No, I mean, how do you know Candace Owens' husband?
Oh, because I used to do a lot of. I'm friendly with Candace Owens. I used to do a lot of
Okay.
photograph work for her,
I was not aware of that.
photographic work. Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
I
That's
know. I know well-known people.
Yeah, I know people. That's what you say.
Yeah, I know people.
I don't
I
know if you
don't.
know, but I know people.
Yeah, no, it was actually like one of Matt's a really really nice guy. Super inquisitive,
Yeah.
super open. Like, and even after our episode, we spoke for like 2.5 hours. We smoked cigars, and it was a great time. And I know he's in Ukraine right now, so
Yeah.
maybe when he gets back, I'll be like, hey, I had a almost 2 hour long discussion with Marie. You should have her on the show to maybe talk interfaith marriage, and we'll see what
I
happens.
I would love that. Just the thought that someone said my name to Matt Fradd and that it would be in his head for maybe like years from now. He's like, maybe I should have her on. That would be
Well, I'm
amazing.
gonna do it.
Because I do think the thing that bothers me a lot, kind of talking back to the whole like, femininity, masculinity thing, is that all of the female Catholic podcasts, almost all of them, there was the Catholic feminist for a while. She stopped doing it. They're so touchy feely, and there's nothing wrong with that. There really is
Hmm.
nothing. I get touchy feely too. That's like there is definitely a time and a place for that. And Matt does get touchy feely to an extent, but again, I grew up with three brothers. I've been around, just I have a sort of
You have
like
thick skin, like you said. You've grown
yeah, I
thick
have a
skin.
yeah, and so I tend to gravitate more towards the podcasts that are like that, the hard hitting ones like Pints of Aquinas, Trent Horn's Council of Trent, the ones that talk about difficult things and that ask difficult questions. And it isn't so much about how you feel, but what you
Yeah.
think. And I really do love that a lot
You
because
you you have a masculine energy about you, and that's
yeah,
not to say, "Hey, you're a dude." No, it's
right.
just like you have this powerful energy around you, and there's
I've definitely been
powerful feminine energy as well, but I feel like you have there's a little bit of, masculine energy in you.
yeah. I think the thing that I struggled with for so long, which is why I love St. Joan of Arc and St. Catherine of Siena, was because for so long I was told that I was too much and that I was intimidating, not only by men that I dated, but by a lot of women too. That I needed to turn it down a notch. And although some of it was came from a place of truth, a small part
Yeah.
of it, a lot of it was just me feeling like I just had to be exactly the way people talked about, Mary. And it always made me feel really like something was wrong. Until I read The Feminine Genius and I came to those conclusions that someone said, I don't know who it was. They said I had a masculine flavor. And I thought that was great. I don't know why. I just,
Masculine flavor? That's interesting, that's an interesting way to
masculine
put it.
flavor. Though, if I were to like really combat that, I would say that, I'm just a strong Italian Catholic woman. And if you really want to kind of dive into what a Catholic woman is, um, you gotta kind of look to the saints and Mary and look at how they endured a lot. They had a lot of strength, whether it was silent or not. Joan of Arc, St. Catherine of Siena, not so silent. Mary,
Mhm.
pretty silent, but still the same amount of strength.
Yes. She's the queen of heaven, don't ever forget that. Marie,
Yes.
thank you so much for coming on here and having a very nice conversation. Very lengthy one. This is a very good length episode. I like this length. It's a good length. So
Yeah.
thank you for coming on. Um, and hopefully we see you again. And hopefully you can get on Pints of Aquinas. That'd be great. You can find her on Instagram at CatholicCaritas. Her link will be down below. So I will post that for all of you to follow her on Instagram. Please drop her a message and tell her that you saw her on the show. Until next time, thank you all. And please have a blessed day. Marie,
Thank you so
bye.
much. Bye.
You're welcome. Bye.